A woman who had previously been unfaithful to her husband during his period of hospitalization sought forgiveness after 12 years. I am Jason, aged 47, and I wish to share a personal experience in the hope of receiving advice. This incident occurred 12 years ago, when I was married to Susan, my first wife. We had been married for 7 years and had 2 children, Laura and Lucas. They were aged 5 and 3, respectively. Our lives were relatively normal until one morning when I was driving to my office and was involved in a road traffic accident. I do not recall the details of the accident, but I do remember waking up in a hospital bed covered in. The nurse informed me that I had regained consciousness after a 2-day coma. I expressed my gratitude to my physician for saving my life and was grateful for the new lease on life. However, I was unaware of the impending disaster that would unfold a week into my treatment. My physician informed me that my lower body was paralyzed and that I might never be able to walk again. This news devastated Susan, as she was forced to assume sole responsibility for managing the household and childcare. I experienced a profound depressive episode, struggling to comprehend the situation. My life in a wheelchair. I spent my days staring at the empty walls of my hospital rooms, cursing how my life had been turned upside down. I dreaded how I would never be able to play soccer with my children, how I would never be able to dance with my wife, and I would never be able to be free again. Susan stopped visiting me in the initial days of my stay. She brought the children 3 times a week. The moments I spent with my family were the only ones I lived for. However, as the days passed, her visits became scarce. I pleaded with her to get the children. Despite my best efforts to win her over, she consistently expressed her desire for a divorce. One day, she handed me the divorce papers, stating that I could not spend my life with a man who was handicapped. She informed me that I was still young and desirable, and that I deserved a normal man. I would be lying if I said that I did not see this coming. I did not anticipate the imminent dissolution of our marriage. I sensed a change in Susan's demeanor shortly after my accident. Some of my friends informed me that they had observed Susan loitering around hand in hand with a middle-aged man. It was reported that she was seen in the company of an older man, possibly in his 50s, in various public places, including cafes and shopping malls, during the evenings and on weekends. Some claimed that she had been having an affair even before my accident, while others suggested that her desperation led her to seek the attention of an older man who was, in fact, quite unpleasant. This was barely 2 months after my accident, and I was still awaiting discharge from the hospital. I was handed divorce papers. While composing this account, I endeavor to maintain a composure that belies the tumultuous circumstances I endured at the time. I was a man in a state of distress, overwhelmed by a multitude of challenges. I was confined to a wheelchair, destitute, and divorced, with no income or savings. I had incurred significant expenses on behalf of the Amy household and the children's education. Fortunately, I had insurance that covered my hospital expenses. To a certain extent, I was forced to liquidate my savings to cover the remaining expenses. Consequently, I was left with nothing. I was tempted to express my frustration by striking my head against a wall and cursing my fate. However, I am unsure how I managed to maintain my sanity during that period. Perhaps it was the desire for revenge that sustained me after I was discharged from the hospital. I relocated to my parents' house. At the age of 35, I was divorced with no income and dependent on my elderly mother, both physically and financially. My mother was a florist who operated a small shop in the suburbs. The limited income from the shop and her pension kept her expenses afloat. With these limited resources, she offered to support me. This was a troubling situation for a 35-year-old. A 62-year-old woman to provide support for a 31-year-old man. Following my discharge, I promptly sought to reunite with my children. Upon arriving at my residence, I discovered it to be locked. Neighbors informed me that Susan had relocated to her lover's residence with the children. According to my neighbors, Susan's lover was a wealthy, divorced man with no children. Some even labeled Susan a gold digger and cheapster for choosing to sleep with a grumpy old man for his fortune. I managed to obtain the address I proceeded to the residence of my former partner, where I was informed that my children were not to be seen. It was stated that the children had already become accustomed to my former partner and had begun to refer to him as Daddy. It was further asserted that my sudden appearance would cause them undue distress. When I persisted in my request for a meeting with my children, I was threatened with a restraining order. I was in a financially precarious situation, relying on the limited income provided by my mother, and thus I was unable to retain legal counsel. I chose to disengage from the situation. It was less than 6 months after my accident and only a few months after my divorce. She was already living with a man. I felt disgust. I asked her how she could abandon me and move on so quickly. I considered myself to be a helpless, wheelchair-bound father. What else could I do? I pleaded with her for at least one chance to prove my worth. She belittled me, saying that I was a burden in her life. I asked her if she had been unfaithful to me. Prior to the dissolution of our marriage, which was finalized a month ago, she informed me that it was none of my concern and that I should never contact her again. I continued to gaze at her, reflecting on my 7 years of marriage to her, who had replaced me with another man in a relatively short period of time. I departed the premises with tears in my eyes and returned home feeling defeated by the humiliation. 1 year later, I was still struggling to come to terms with the dissolution of my marriage. My mother, who had been a source of support throughout my life, encouraged me to take control of my destiny. I was initially uncertain about my future direction. I joined my mother in her flower shop, where I assisted with various tasks, including making bouquets, serving customers, and cleaning the premises. I soon recognized the business's immense potential for growth, but my mother's frail health prevented her from pursuing this opportunity independently. I reconnected with my professional network to secure contracts with event management companies for floral arrangements at various events. Gradually, I assembled a team and secured contracts for venue decorations. After a period of 12 years, I was finally able to establish my own event management company. During this period, I had to rebuild my life from scratch. My mother was a constant source of support and motivation, helping me to overcome the challenges I faced. A year after my accident, I learned that Susan was leaving the city with my children and her lover. I rushed to the house to meet my children, but they had already left by the time I reached the house. I had attempted to contact my children on several occasions, but Susan had always insulted me and chased me away. At the time, she had full custody of the children and was therefore able to do so. I was unable to contest joint custody due to my physical and financial limitations. I was unable to challenge her restraining order because I was unable to afford legal counsel. Susan's wealthy boyfriend, Evan, was a source of uncertainty. I was unaware of his involvement with Susan prior to my accident and, if he was not involved, I was unsure of how he suddenly appeared in her life. I only knew that he was a wealthy man with substantial ancestral property over the past 12 years. Whenever I received information about my children, I traveled to meet them, but I was unsuccessful each time Susan threatened. I was arrested on the grounds that my former partner had the financial resources and connections to avoid legal consequences. It is worth noting that despite living together for a year, this individual did not marry Susan. I finally filed for joint custody after waiting for my event management business to stabilize. I filed for custody and was granted 15 days, which I will spend with my children next week. Despite Susan's objections, I hired a lawyer who presented my case effectively. I was granted 15 days, which is a reasonable amount of time for me to spend with my children. I recently contacted my children, who are now 17 and 15 years old, to arrange a meeting. I was informed that they would be amenable to such an encounter. While I am aware that I cannot compensate for the 12 years that have elapsed, I wish to spend quality time with my children as the time is nearing. I am experiencing a complex emotional state, comprising feelings of nervousness and delight. My children are aware that I am their biological father. However, I am concerned that they may have been influenced by their mother's actions in a negative manner. I am unsure of the extent to which Susan has informed them about my absence over the past 12 years. I am also uncertain about the appropriateness of disclosing the truth about their mother to them. I would be grateful for any insights or suggestions on this matter. I am currently experiencing a dual state of emotion, nervousness and excitement. I have an update to share. In my previous post, I neglected to mention two crucial details. First, I remarried a woman named Amy, who is a talented interior designer. I met her at an event where she was designing the wedding venue and providing the flowers. At that time, I had not yet started my own company. Our initial encounter did not result in immediate romantic feelings, but we had a strong connection. We continued to meet at similar events in the following months and gradually became friends. Amy was a single mother of a 3-year-old child. The following year, the idea of establishing an event management company originated with my daughter, who had previously worked for one of the companies in question for an extended period and thus possessed the requisite contacts and industry knowledge. I collaborated with her to launch the enterprise, which we proceeded to operate as a partnership for approximately a year before marrying. We subsequently proceeded to live together as a family of 4, comprising my daughter, Amy, her daughter, Mia, and my mother. Furthermore, Amy, her daughter, was pleased to have a grandmother in her life, and my mother was similarly gratified. The second piece of information pertained to accident compensation. I was struck by a speeding truck, and I would have been justly compensated by the logistics company that owned the truck. However, at that time, the company managed to avoid paying anything by manipulating the facts surrounding the accident. The accident and the subsequent attempt to blame me for it prevented me from hiring a competent lawyer at the time. Consequently, I was unable to secure any compensation. It is common knowledge that large corporations employ substantial resources to retain the services of highly skilled attorneys to protect their interests. Following my marriage to Amy, she advised me to refile the case, given that we were now in a position to afford a suitable lawyer. The case is still pending, but my lawyer has my children were scheduled to visit me after 12 years of my divorce. I was excited and nervous, but Amy provided reassurance and support. Upon their arrival at the airport, I was initially pleased to see them, but we soon realized that we had limited time for conversation. It was an awkward situation. Upon our arrival at the house from the airport, I attempted to initiate conversation with the children regarding their school life and the city. I deliberately avoided discussing their mother, as they did not bring her up. The children were unusually silent or perhaps looking for an opportunity to plug into their earphones like any other teenager. Upon reaching home, we were welcomed by Amy. The children looked shocked, as if they did not anticipate this coming. I am unsure why Amy was a surprise to them, given that their mother could live with them. Another man within months of our divorce. Why can't I remarry? Amy had set up the guest room for the children. We had lunch together and Amy laid out the vacation itinerary we had planned for the family. They gave a neutral reaction to everything. Neither were they excited nor did they dismiss the plan. Amy and I were confused by their mixed response. They locked themselves up in their room and soon after that I got a call from their mother, Susan, accusing me of tricking our children. She said it brought the children to my house, so Amy and I was able to influence them to a certain extent. I felt disoriented by her behavior, which I perceived as accusatory. She accused me of concealing information about my marriage. I was perplexed by her accusations. I terminated the call, but she persisted in contacting me. I decided to address the underlying issue. I contacted my children and inquired about their concerns. Initially, they were hesitant to speak, but they eventually did so. They expressed anger at me because they had been told that I had abandoned them. Susan had influenced them to believe that I had left them. She had filled their minds with falsehoods and deceptions. I informed them of the truth. It was not that their mother jumped to another man as soon as she got the opportunity. They were children at the time, yet they remember those incidents very well. I informed them of the circumstances surrounding Susan's disappearance with them to the old man's house and how she had threatened and chased me away whenever I attempted to contact them. I presented them with the restraining letter and all my rejected pleas to meet them. They were visibly distressed and expressed regret for having believed in their mother's lies for so long. My younger son, Lucas, admitted that he had attempted to reach out to them on one occasion. Information about this situation was disseminated on social media. Susan was the first to discover the affair and used emotional blackmail to force the man to promise that he would never contact me again. The children also admitted to having been rebuked by Susan's husband. They were mistreated at family gatherings because they were unmarried. Susan continued to reside in the man's house as a mistress, despite the fact that he paid for their education. He was never a fatherly figure to them. As I learned more about the circumstances surrounding my children's lives, I experienced a profound sense of sadness and distress. We embraced each other and shed tears of joy as we embarked on a week-long vacation in Florida. We had a splendid time together. Laura and Lucas bonded with Amy and Mia, who was celebrating her 8th birthday. I was overjoyed to see my entire family reunited. My children uploaded our group photos on social media, captioning them, "Happy Family." As soon as Susan saw those photographs, she called them up and berated them for their foolish behavior. She blamed them for betraying her by bonding with us. She texted me, threatening that she would not let me meet my children. Furthermore, if I had done anything to cause my children to dislike their stepmother, I would have laughed at her empty threats and continued with our planned vacation. After returning from the vacation, my children met with my relatives, who were happy to host them. I was pleased to see the old bonds rekindled. When they were about to leave, they promised to keep in touch, despite Susan's threats. They said that they felt suffocated by the house and that they would move back with me once they completed high school. I hugged them and said goodbye. After returning home, I attempted to confront Susan about her alleged evilness, but she turned the tables on me, accusing me of manipulating them against her. It has been several months since they returned, but we speak on a regular basis. I hope to have them back with me. I will provide an update if any developments occur. Update 2. I am aware that it has been a considerable length of time since I have provided an update. There have been a number of significant developments over the past 6 months. Following my initial meeting with my children 3 months ago, the impending court case with the logistics company was settled. I was awarded substantial compensation. In addition to the aforementioned accident, I would also like to bring to your attention the injustices that occurred during the initial trial. It is my understanding that the logistics company whose truck rammed into my car manipulated the case and pinned the blame on me for the accident. As a result, I was not compensated at all. I appealed the decision again at my wife's suggestion and was successful this time. I informed my children of the good news and they were equally elated. They expressed a desire to meet me and I promised to have them back with me permanently. A month later, Susan showed up at my office and held my hand. I was taken aback by her sudden appearance and the unexpected nature of her request for forgiveness. She revealed that, following my accident, she had become desperate and had sought the services of an older man who was seeking a sugar baby. I was unaware of the terminology associated with this practice until I conducted an online search on that day. The man had a history of unpleasant experiences with a younger woman who had taken his money after a few months and then disappeared. He decided to settle with a woman who was not as young as he would have liked, Susan, who was 32 at the time. Susan had 2 children, which served as a guarantee of her loyalty. The man had made it clear that he would not. He proposed marriage and instead proposed that she remain his mistress, as he was unwilling to share the inheritance with her children. Susan consented to his terms, as he had promised to provide for their education. I inquired as to why she had not sought employment. She replied that she had never worked and was uncertain if she could earn a similar lifestyle, which her lover had provided for her without compensation. She reiterated that she had done everything in her power to safeguard the children's future. She stood firm on her grounds, asserting that the children would have grown up in poverty had she not taken that step. I became increasingly irritated. In response to her persistent urging, I expressed my frustration, stating that she could have at least given me an opportunity to recuperate if she was genuinely concerned about our children's future. I argued that she should have discussed this with me instead of making assumptions and abandoning me without any prior notice. I clarified that I had moved on and her pleas were irrelevant. She proceeded to recount numerous instances of our happy moments, including our wedding day and the births of our 2 children. I dismissed her attempts to persuade me, stating that I had changed significantly and that these memories had faded. She made a statement that was meaningless to me. She crossed the lane by saying that she and my children were my original family, not Amy and Mia. She said that Mia was not my daughter and that I could never have a proper family with Amy and Mia. I felt disgusted at her cruel mind. She insisted that I take her back so that the real family could reunite. I made her clear that I love Amy and Mia and that they are my real family and not hers. She refused to leave my office, creating a scene. She left only when I threatened her with the police. I went back home and narrated this to my Amy, who was naturally distressed by this, is a mature woman and did not make a fuss about it. My mother said that she had never liked Susan because of her selfishness. She even said that Susan had returned to me only because of the money I had received after the court settlement. This woman is indeed a gold digger. When my children learned about their mother's behavior, they berated her and told her to stay in her lane. I'm not sure how her sugar daddy got to know about this incident, and he had threatened to throw her away if she attempted to establish contact with me at a subsequent encounter. I am profoundly grateful to him. The most recent update is that my children are moving in with me this month. They would reside with us for a brief period before I enrolled them in a nearby college. They desired to experience the college life and reside at a hostel. I believe that maintaining a connection is essential, yet it is also vital to allow for personal growth and development. The children have distanced themselves from Susan, and in the end, she is left with nothing but her sugar daddy. I hope that she will be able to enjoy the benefits of the relationship until it ultimately fails.